Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Business as a Magical Practice podcast. So delighted that you're here with me again for another week. And thank you so much for all the feedback on the Playing with Time Magic episode that came out a couple weeks ago. I got so many messages from friends, from listeners that it was just so needed and welcomed, and a lot of ideas spurred out of it. So I guess we will be exploring that topic together more and more in the coming months. So excited to be going on that journey with you. But today we are talking about being a prosumer. As you all know, a big issue in our world today is that we are a consumer-centric society. And don't get me wrong, I love consumption. Consumption is a part of life. If we didn't consume, we would wither and die. Like, you gotta eat, my friends. We need to eat food. We need to drink water for survival. And so do all of the other animals and living beings on this planet. Plants even need to consume to survive. They consume sunlight and water and nutrients from the soil so that they can grow. And beyond basic needs, we as humans consume to keep our social networks healthy. So it's not just about basic need survival. And commerce and trade are key in forming human bonds with each other and between larger communities. But there's no question that we've gotten a little out of balance with our consumption. We see it in more than 2/3 of adults in the US being overweight or obese. We see it in the rise of fast fashion. We see it in some reports indicating that we consume twice as many material goods today as we did 50 years ago. And then the average American throwing away 65 pounds of clothing per year. So while consuming is not necessary, it is a healthy thing to do on a physical, social, and even spiritual level, we are out of balance. So let us today talk about a solution: becoming a prosumer. The prosumer is someone who produces more than they consume. At the time when I first came into this idea of this concept, I was consuming a lot of information at the time without really doing anything with it, like reading lots of books, blogs, whatever, listening to a lot of podcasts without producing anything from all of that consumption. And at the time, I was also miserable and I felt so lost. And now I can look back and really see that it is actually this connection to taking in, consuming without creating, without producing, and this beautiful inflow and outflow of life. We've all had that friend that is so enlivened by life. They create, they act, they do. You all have that friend, and we're just so enlivened by them. And on the other side of things, overconsumption is the disease of our modern world. It's stuck energy, like a blockage in the river. Have you ever seen this? I grew up in Michigan in the Metro Detroit area with a pond and a creek in my backyard. And every so often, branches would build up in a bend in the creek and block the water in the river. And lo and behold, the water in that part of the stream becomes nasty. Weird bacteria starts breeding, all sorts of random stuff gets stuck in it. It gets cloudy and murky and green, and it smells horrible. So why is this? It happens every single time. It's not like someone came in and added foul, smelly poop water to that part of the stream. It's the same water as is flowing in the rest of the stream. It's just blocked, and that block festers. The lack of motion, the lack of fresh energy becomes rancid, foul, gross. So we need both the inhale and the exhale. We need consistent, fresh energy moving through us. When I was 19, I did a year-long Ashtanga yoga apprenticeship. And a part of the study was a reading list. I tried to figure out the book that I'm about to refer to when I was prepping for this podcast, but I couldn't. So I'm just sharing a memory without the exact quote or anything, but I'm sure you guys will understand. So in a well-known book written by one of the main dudes that brought yoga to the West, he wrote about the importance of pranayama, the importance of the breath. So working with, we all know asana. In yoga, that is the actual movement, the body movement. And pranayama is the breath element of yoga. So working with the breath is the more advanced form of yoga, where asana, body movement, is the first step, the initiation into working with the breath. So this teacher spoke on, in an oh so concise guru way, how the breath is the most important nourishment there is, and the most important health practice there is. It's the first way we take in the world. Can you, like, when you imagine a baby being birthed, that first breath is that first breath outside of the womb. And from the moment we're born, we need it. But instead, we sit on our couches, consuming too much food without presence. We buy a bunch of stuff off of Amazon. We keep riding the shopper's high. I mean, retail therapy is called therapy for a reason. It brings us pleasure, however fleeting, on a molecular level, with pleasure chemicals being released in your brain with every purchase, every act of consumption. Or we're exhausted after a long day of work, but we've been producing meaningless shit during that entire work day, not the true inspiration birthed from our souls. Unnecessary busy work in our business because we haven't distilled our business and our systems down to the core genius. And there is an unquestionable difference between doing and creating. You can spend 8 hours doing work. That work can be exhilarating and fulfilling, or pure drudgery. We're creating, producing something from your soul, producing something that weaves together everything you've consumed. That's not just doing. So I have lived on Maui since 2013, and in the Hawaiian language, white people are called haulis. Haole, H-A''OLE. It means without breath. So Hawaii, we all know this, how in the Hawaiian language, how you say hello, how you say love, how you say goodbye, it's all the same. It's aloha. And there's an actual movement associated with it. You touch foreheads to foreheads and you share a breath. Aha, that's breath in the Hawaiian language. So you're sharing a breath, you're sharing ha, aloha. So the white men that came to colonize they came to colonize the Hawaiian Islands, and they greeted the people with a handshake without breath. So what a great representation of colonization, right? In a colonizer-based society, we inhale, we take in, but we don't exhale. We don't let go, give back. We don't create from our genius. So the white colonizers, the haulis, they came in and took without breath. And we have a diseased people without breath, a diseased society without breath, a stuck, foul-smelling energy blockage without breath. Because the truth is, we are all creators. We are all creative beings. We all have genius. And we can create a local economy and an ethical economy that honors and respects each other's gifts and creations and genius, that gives and receives, produces and consumes. Hence, prosumer, producing and consuming, prosumer. And so there was this story on Instagram a few years ago. I was trying to find it, couldn't find it. But it was about a woman working at a factory in some country, like a totally horrible factory conditions. In some country, our consumer society has laid waste to. She spoke of working in the factory day in and day out to barely get by. Horrible working conditions, insane hours, being paid barely nothing, essentially an indentured servant. And she didn't know another option to support herself or her family. But she got some level of satisfaction in knowing that at least the stuff that her factory was producing was so embedded with the despair and tragedy of all of the workers, the people who were essentially indentured servants, that no one would buy these items that they're producing. They would be hit so intensely with the embedded despair of the items that they would just run away. All of these items no one would purchase because they would be feeling all of the horrible, horrible feelings that went into creating them. So this woman gets to the US after some string of events and goes to some big box store and is horrified by all the people buying the thing that was produced in her factory. No one has noticed. No one feels the embedded despair in the unethically produced stuff. So imagine the true power and meaning of buying a cashmere sweater, or if you know the person who grows your arugula, and you know the woman who made your sweater was paid well and has a pleasant workplace, and the sheep who grew the wool were treated well on a pasture instead of brutally abused. As magical people, we create meaning through ritual, through offering, through prayer, through acknowledging the meaning and connection of everything where others truly miss it. That's a part of us being magical people. We recognize connection. We give meaning where other people miss. So you already know the power of this, even if it's an unconscious knowing. You know the significance of consuming things that were made with love. You should also know the significance of you producing things out of love and play and being a part of the beautiful inhale and exhale of our upcoming prosumer society. So if we can go into these new choices, if we can go into this new ethical local economy in which you do know who grows your food, you do know who weaves the sweater, who knits the scarf, who carves the beautiful centerpiece for your table, who creates the table. And that person makes choices. They're doing it out of love. They're doing it out of their genius. And they're creating something out of love and genius. And they're choosing what goes into the creation out of pure ethics. So finding reclaimed wood, or harvesting ethically wood, or treating the sheep that creates the cashmere. I actually don't know what animal creates cashmere. I should have looked that up before having this conversation. Is it a sheep? I'm assuming it's a sheep, but I'm kind of second guessing it now that we're talking about it. Anyways, that sheep that creates the wool, that creates the sweater, is on a beautiful countryside and is loved by its owners and caregivers. So some actions for you with this. What's your producer to consumer ratio? How much of your time or your energy goes into producing, truly producing, not just doing, versus consuming? How much do you consume compared to how much you can produce, essentially? What are the divinely inspired creations that are stuck inside of you that you aren't actively releasing? So shout out to Helena Grant of hgrantstyle.com. She inspired this entire podcast. She interviewed me for her Divine Instruments Summit, which is coming up very soon. And we had this full, epic, unplanned conversation after she stopped recording. So I had a completely different conversation with her on business as a magical practice. So you can sign up for the summit. It is completely free. It is at divineinstrumentsglobalevent.com. The link will be in the show notes. And that is from May 24th through 28th, 2021. So when this podcast release, it'll be like very soon. So go sign up right now. And subtitle is Attaining Sovereignty Through Transcendence, which is so good. But on a final note, I do want to bring up that creation begets creation. When you start a writing practice, more writing and inspiration tends to flow. Our brain starts becoming more efficient at being inspired and making connections, right? The more you create posts for social media, the more inspiration comes. The more you create art, the more inspiration comes. So get going. Start creating whatever that thing is for you. It gets easier. Also, ask yourself, how can I expand being a prosumer into other areas of my life? So I am all for batching. I'm all for specialization. I often tell my clients to focus on their sphere of genius and delegate the rest. But we're also not machines. The Industrial Revolution brought the innovation of the assembly line, where each person in the line did one specialized task, and it made assembling a car significantly, or machines significantly more efficient, like ridiculously so, because specialization and niching echoes this. And just because specializing in your work life can bring you more joy and money and take it, it can also take it off balance. Okay, starting over. And just because specializing in our work life can bring us more joy and money, taking it off balance will sap us of joy, right? If we're specialized, we're only doing one work thing all of the time, and then we're just specializing all of our time and energy into that one thing, our life will actually be sapped of joy. So this is where producing and creating and having hobbies and passions outside of our businesses come in. It nourishes us on a deep, deep level, especially if you work online from home on a computer. So becoming a prosumer in your personal life so that you're using your hands and your body and your senses, this actually feeds your business. It gives you more inspiration. It helps your brain make more connections so that you can develop your most innovative and life-changing ideas and concepts. I see this every time I spend time in the gardens, at my husband's farm. It's so consistent that my brain makes more connections and comes up with new ideas when my hands are in the dirt and I'm surrounded by plants. And nature is the biggest producer and consumer that there is. It is our ultimate source of inspiration as humans. So have a great week, everyone. I will talk to you next Thursday. And if you want to play with me before then, head on over to the Business as a Magical Practice Facebook group. And don't forget to rate and review this podcast. It takes less than 30 seconds to do so. And it makes a serious impact on whether iTunes shows this podcast to more interested people. So love you all and have a lovely, lovely day and a lovely, lovely week. Talk to you next time.